Excellent connection, it says. I think I'm live. Hi guys. Oh, dang, I lost it on my phone. Hi everybody, happy October. Okay, turn the sound off. Perfect. So we're just gonna dive right in. Go ahead and say hi in the chat if you guys want. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and hop over here, share my screen, and we're just gonna go dive in. It'll probably be a long video. It's just kind of how it is. Hi Daisy. All right, share my screen. Hop over here. Should be formatted right so you guys can actually see the words. Okay, so it's our thumbnail, right? These are all the things we're going to kind of talk about here as we go along. It's kind of like a synopsis of the month's energy. These pictures here I chose to kind of represent the two moons that we have this month. We have a Aries full moon in just a couple of days. We'll actually be meeting over on Patreon. It was going to be tomorrow, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. I don't think I'm going to be able to do two in a row. So I think it'll be Friday. I try not to schedule them on Fridays, but I think it'll be Friday. The moon is on the 9th, but that moon is in Aries, the sign of the self. It's sitting pretty much exactly conjunct Chiron, and it really is going to feel like this culmination of healing and this like rebirth of the self. I called it here the Starborn self. Because of one of the archetype cards I pulled at the end. But it really is this energy of like, man, I've done a lot of work and now I'm ready to begin, because Chiron will still be retrograde. Chiron's retrograde, but I will be ready to step into this new like version of myself after I've integrated not only like the concept of the wound, like even being able to like know that it exists, but also integrated the wisdom that that wound offers us because of all the work we've been doing. A full moon is a culmination, a 6-month culmination, and this culmination and illumination is falling in Aries, the sign of the self, opposite Libra. The sun in Libra, and so it does have this energy of like the self and the partnership dynamic. This whole month is riddled with self partnership dynamics, but it's this rebirth of the self, and it's not like a rebirth because of like a new mindset gained or new opportunities coming our way. It's specifically a rebirth because of this deconstruction that we have done, much like a butterfly would do or a caterpillar would do, this alchemical process that we have done, and this rebirth that Aries ultimately represents. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and it represents that spark of life, that rebirth of the self. And so that's why, you know, I picked this image. I made it on this computer in the pink. Like my Virgo placements have to point this out. The pink on this HP computer I have like totally matches my other pink I have going on. But then when I saw it on the iPhone or on my Mac, it like totally doesn't match. It's like a very bright pink. Whatever, just pretend it matches. And then what we have here is actually a partial solar eclipse. So I know it kind of looks like a crescent moon, but it's actually a partial solar eclipse, and our month ends with the kickstart of eclipse season, which will then move into November as well, with a Scorpio partial solar eclipse. So that's kind of like the imagery we have going on. This is all stuff we're going to talk about as we go, so we're just going to kind of like go. Okay, so those of you who are Patreon members, you have access. Okay, so I recently decided that I'm going to make a video where I explain like the outline of these videos so that I don't have to kind of give the same spiel every month, and I can just like link it down below, and I'll be like, oh, if you guys are new and you don't really know like what's going on here, watch the video down below and you'll understand like the color code and like what this whole calendar is all about, like this whole spiel that I have to kind of do every single time. But if you are a Patreon member, you have access to this calendar over on Patreon as a PDF that you can download that, you know, will be better resolution. Those of you on YouTube, you are more than welcome to take a screenshot of this. I don't really care. This is all of the stuff we're going to be kind of diving into here. Before I touch on the calendar somewhat, I want to kind of do all this stuff here. So if you would like to join my Patreon, there is a link down below. My Patreon is a sliding scale, so you can have access to all the different videos that I do every month. I'm realizing there should be, oh, the Eclipse right there, that one, okay. All of the different videos that I do every month, regardless of what tier you are. So like you could pay whatever you want and have access to those. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. And my October books are all full for client sessions, but I am now taking orders for November, and all of those different links are down below. Okay, so I originally started making these calendars for me, just so that I, you know, had the whole month mapped out, all of the different things, you know, the traditional transits, the more like galactic transits. And then those of you who've been following my work for a while, you may kind of know like what's going on here. Those of you who haven't, you know, you might not. So I'm just going to kind of touch on this color key. I think part of my mission, or whatever you want to call it, is to pull together several systems into a more cohesive look at the sky, a more expanded view of the sky. That's why in these next couple slides, I talk about, you know, what we can see up in the sky versus the season that we are in, because they're actually opposite. I talk about this polarity dynamic that we have, where we don't just have one sign activated by the season, but we also have its polar sign activated. And this chart was my way of just kind of, you know, compiling it all together and then having it so that, you know, I say a lot of stuff in this video and it's really hard to remember it all. And so like later in the month, let's say like something goes down on the 10th, you can come and reference this and be like, okay, what's going on the 10th? And you can see like, oh, there's a black one. Oh, there's a yellow one. Oh, there's a green one. The black ones are extra important transits. Like these are really big, significant things happening in the sky. The yellow ones are really important as well. And then the green ones are like these more otherworldly transits, like the weird points I use, asteroids, black holes, fixed stars, things like that, right? And so you can see like maybe the kind of energy around that day, you know, Venus opposite Chiron, that's going to have a lot to do with our relationships and our healing and that like unlocking of the wisdom within the wounds type of stuff. Mercury's entering Libra that day. So the planet of communication of the mind is entering the realm of relationships. For like the third and final time because of this retrograde period. And so it's a really significant moment. And so you can kind of get an idea of like the energy of the day by referencing this later in the month. So what we kind of have here are the pink ones are when we meet here for live streams. So we meet, like I said, I was planning on doing it tomorrow, but I think it's going to be Friday, like if we're being real. The blue ones are our lunations. So we have the Aries new moon on the 9th at 16 degrees. We have the Scorpio solar eclipse on the 25th at 2 degrees. These blue ones, these dark blue ones with the white writing that you see like going all the way across here, this is actually the moon's transit all the way through the zodiac throughout the month. making contact with specific fixed stars or black holes or whatnot. And I kind of have started tracking the moons. Hi, Leslie. The moon's transit around the month to pair that alongside the sun and the planets that everybody else pays attention to, as a way to kind of merge together the two systems of like tropical astrology, which is rooted in the seasons and therefore the sun, and sidereal astrology, which is rooted where the specific stars are, and therefore the stars and the nighttime sky and the moon. And the Eastern systems that are tied to sidereal astrology focus very heavily on the moon. And so this is my way of combining the two together. So the dark blue stuff, that's where the moon is at that day. That's where your subconscious is at. That's where your emotions are at. That's where your unconscious mind is at. That's where these intuitive impulses are coming from. That's the unseen realm versus like the seen realm of this other stuff, right? The green ones, like I said before, those are the other worldly transits, the far out stuff you probably only hear about over here. Important transits, extra important transits, and then like key dates like equinox, solstice points. This month we have Samhain and Halloween, and so I have that marked. This is just what's on our thumbnail. Down here, these are a couple of transits that we're having all month. These planets down at the bottom corner are going to be in that position for a long time. So Jupiter retrograde is at the the beginning degrees of Aries, and it's in opposition to the super galactic center all month. Jupiter, I wrote here, make sure you go outside and look at Jupiter. Jupiter right now in the northern hemisphere is huge. He's so bright. He's so easy to see. And right now, he is sitting opposite our super galactic center, the black hole that the Milky Way and 130 other galaxies all rotate around. The center of our super cluster is aligned in opposition with us in the middle on Earth with Jupiter retrograde, who is internally expanding right now. I have Jupiter retrograde in my chart in the 8th house of the occult. It's why I have to do everything myself. And I can't learn from like outside teachers unless it's through disagreeing with them ultimately. But it's a lot of like internal exploration. Jupiter explores, but when he's retrograde, it's internal quests. And right now, Jupiter, the planet that represents our higher mind, is sitting opposite the supergalactic center. So like honestly, just going outside at some point this month, maybe ideally like tomorrow when it's in its exact opposition to the supergalactic center, but like really it's within orb all month. Going outside and looking at Jupiter, he is so easy to find. Seriously, go outside, look up, look for the brightest thing in the sky that's not the moon. It's going to look like a really big star, but it's not a star, it's Jupiter. And if you need help, there's tons of apps that you can just point at the sky and it'll tell you like, yeah, that's Jupiter. But really you can't miss him. You can't miss him. Go outside, find some time to connect with him. Jupiter represents our higher philosophical mind. He literally represents our higher self. And both him and Mercury actually transits the galactic center this month. So Jupiter is in opposition with Earth in the middle, and Mercury, the planet that represents our lower mind, while Jupiter represents our higher mind, will actually be conjunct the galactic center. The supergalactic center for the 3rd time because of its retrograde. So this is a huge culmination of this super galactic energy, and it's aligned with both our lower analytical, logical mind and our higher philosophical, expansive mind, are both aligned with this point. And there's like different ways that you connect with it. Really just me telling you this now makes you kind of know it, and so you're like aware of it, and so it starts like channeling into your reality. You can do meditations, you can do like channel writing, you can do some sort of ritual, you can go outside, and the easiest way is just go outside, take off your shoes, put your feet on the earth, ground down and look up at Jupiter for like a couple of minutes and then call it a day. You don't need to overthink any of this. I've also started covering the constellations that are in our night sky. So maybe you've heard me say before that astrology is legitimately like an elitist modality, you know, especially back in the day. Like nowadays it's readily available to everybody, but like back in the day it was kept for like the priestly class or like the kings and the queens and the royal lineages. Like your everyday folk wasn't really aware of the sort of mathematics, the aspects, what the sun was conjunct, you know? But our ancestors every night would sit around the campfire and they would look up at the sky at those stars, which are actually opposite where the sun is. So it's opposite the season that it's in, right? So this month, October, we are in Libra season. The sun is in Libra and it's shifting into Scorpio. And these are the constellations that we see. The Earth is actually sitting in Aries and moving into Taurus. We also have Pisces and Aquarius still up in the sky. And so these were the constellations that our ancestors saw at this time. These were the constellations that they were telling stories about. These were the constellations that they were sharing, that they could see. And so I've been including these as well. I'm not going to read all of this. You're more than welcome to screenshot it and read it. These are some of the constellations that are in the sky. We're actually going to cover several of these constellations in our Aries full moon video, which I guess probably Friday, because that moon is conjunct Andromeda. And all of these players are part of that Andromeda mythology. The queen is Andromeda's mother, Cassiopeia. The king, who I can never pronounce his name, but he is Andromeda's father. Andromeda and Perseus are divine partners. We're going to talk a lot about them in a couple of days. Cetus is the sea monster that's sent to like ravish their kingdom, and then they sacrifice Andromeda to that sea serpent. The Pegasus is also part of the same mythology. And so these are things we're going to be touching on for the full moon, which will be obviously in the nighttime sky, illuminating this area of the sky. And so these stars are very much important, and it is the polarity. It's the other side of the story, as you can see here. And I think it's not talked about enough. So here's a little bit about the astronomy or the mythology of some of the constellations that you can see this month. This is from the book Northern Star to the Southern Cross. And like I said, you're more than welcome to like screenshot this, read it. I just want to kind of give us an idea of like what is really going on in the sky, this like holistic look, right? Because as above, so below. It is us. And if we're only looking at one side of it where the sun is, we're polarized into the light. We're polarized into our masculine faculties, and we're not looking at what we can actually see at nighttime when we look up, you know? So this is from another book. I forget what it's called. What's it called? I just got it. Guide to the Stars, Exploring the Sky with Binoculars. I just picked this up at like a used bookstore the other day, but these charts are perfect because this shows what the story looks like. So this one book, it only talks about the king. He doesn't even say that Cassiopeia can be seen. He only talks about the king, which is really unfortunate because this constellation is very faint and small and hard to see. And Cassiopeia, the queen, is like really bright and big and easier to see. Sometimes it looks like an M during one part of the year for like, you know, mom, mother, Mary. And sometimes it looks like a W, which, you know, woman, womb. So it has that sort of connotation to it. But like I said, we're going to talk about like the story of this area of the sky in 2 nights. So you're more than welcome to join us. But this is, if you live in the Northern Hemisphere and you go and you look towards the north, this is what the sky looks like. This is what you can see, what you can connect with. if you look towards the south, so this is still the northern hemisphere, these are the constellations that you can connect with. And you like, don't forget Jupiter. Like, just go. Some of us won't be able to see half the shit. I live in LA. There's a lot of light pollution. I can't see half these stars, but I can see Jupiter. And right now he's aligned with the center of not just these stars, but like a massive amount of stars, the center of our super cluster. And so it really is this like activating moment that we can intentionally take advantage of. Okay, let's go to the chart. Oh yeah, it definitely is like an elitist concept. Astrology, that is. Okay, so what am I doing here? What did I say I was doing? Okay, yes, I was going here. Okay, so what we have here is the chart for the first. I want to really quick cover a couple of things that happened leading up to where we're kind of at right now. Okay, I need more room here for all my notes. Probably shouldn't have glued that calendar into my notebook yet until we did this. Okay, so the first of the month kind of kicked off with a pretty intense, expansive aspect, and that's the opposition of Venus and Jupiter retrograde. So Jupiter is retrograde at the beginning degrees of Aries, and it's sitting opposite. It was like later in the day. This is 1 a.m., so I don't know when it was, but it was a little bit later in the day. Just going to put this to noon, so it's like in the middle. Okay, so it kicked off the month with this sort of energy of internal growth when it comes to our relationships, but also the self. And it's this dynamic of the self and others. Aries literally governs the self. Jupiter is the planet that expands. Right now, he is expanding the self, starting a new 12-year journey of expanding throughout the zodiac. He's about to dip back into Pisces, that cosmic womb here later this month, actually. I don't know. We'll get there eventually. He's about to dip back into Pisces, this sort of like cosmic womb. Actually, no. What is he? He's retrograde. Yeah. So he's about to dip back into Pisces, but right now he's at this like ending degrees of Aries, at these what's known as the very critical degrees. So as he inches closer to 0 degrees of Aries, he's going to be at that start of the zodiac. The 0 degree point in astrology is considered very significant regardless of what sign it falls in. Both the 0 degree and the 29th degree, both the 0 degree and the 29th degree, the beginning and the final degrees of the zodiac are both considered very strong points. And so this 0 degree point is being transited 3 times by Jupiter as it transited into Aries and did a lot of expansion within the self. Stationed retrograde, it transited backward, is now going to go back into Pisces, that realm of the unconscious, that realm of dreams, of mysticism. Then it will station direct and do it a 3rd time. And so we're coming to this midway point of this expansion of the self, and it's happening opposite Libra in its home sign. I mean, it's happening opposite Venus in its home sign of Libra, in this realm of relationships, in this realm of others, right? So in the thumbnail, I wrote this starborn self and the divine partnership. And you know, a lot of times we think of divine partnership as like soulmates or like our significant other that's like so divinely orchestrated. And yeah, that's a thing. But that's not the only thing. Aries governs the self, and Libra governs others, all others. And a lot of interactions with other people are divinely orchestrated. This governs business partnerships. This governs contracts with other people. This governs interactions with another human being, whatever it may be for. Usually, this house governs marriage and relationships. So yes, it is oftentimes a romantic divine partner, but it doesn't always have to be. We have these sort of collisions happen that take us on these fated, expansive trajectories that help us to grow, that help us to expand, that help us to reach new heights. They don't always necessarily have to be romantic, although Libra does love that, as does Venus, particularly in Libra. But a lot of these times with Libra, these are mental relationships, especially with Jupiter here. These help our mind to grow. This helps our belief systems to grow. This helps us to grow as individuals and become this sort of like star-born entity that we naturally are. And we'll talk more about that archetype when we get to the card. So the month kicked off with this, and it was just kind of foreshadowing the entire month, because the entire month is just transit after transit after transit of like expansive growth, healing, and transmutation within the self-other dynamic, and how this kind of happens simultaneously, particularly within Libra season and Scorpio season. That's where we merge with other people. Libra governs other people. Scorpio literally governs the merging of people, like procreation and like sex, and deep, intimate relationships. Okay, so on the 2nd, Mercury stationed direct. So Mercury stationed direct at 24 degrees of Virgo, and now it will transit for the 3rd and final time over these final degrees of Virgo into Libra over the supergalactic center for the 3rd time, and then onward to about, I think it was at 9 degrees when it stationed retrograde. I don't know if you guys care, but I can look. 8 degrees. I was close. So about where the sun is now. So the sun's kind of made it out of that shadow. And now Mercury needs to kind of catch up, right? And that final push over the supergalactic center, which will be exact on the 12th, the same day that it opposes Jupiter. So it's like a Jupiter supergalactic center activation. That'll be a significant period in this Mercury retrograde like lesson, right? We've all had Mercury and the sun transiting through both Libra and Virgo, shining light and then having us reconfigure and restructure this area somewhat over the past couple of weeks. And now Mercury is making its 3rd and final pass over this point, and it's stationed direct in preparing to do so on the 2nd. So now it's doing that last pass, and that's when we really start to get that semblance of clarity when it comes to kind of like what this was all about, what this sort of pause and redirection and restructuring was helping us to release in order to help us give birth to what's next, right? So you can expect, if like Mercury's been kicking your ass, like Mercury has been kicking my ass. I need to apologize to like all my clients last month. Like, oh my gosh, it took me forever to get you guys your emailed sessions sent to you and like to get packages mailed out. Like it was like the gas was turned off and like I could hardly even function in the outward world, but like in the inward world, there was like a lot going on. But now Mercury's coming back through to help us kind of like pick up those pieces and see the picture, the big picture of what this was kind of all about, right? On that same day, the moon transited over Atlantis and the asteroid Medusa in Capricorn. So this is a rigid sign, Capricorn. It's very structured. It is a cardinal sign, so it can be initiated into new systems and new structures. It is shifting and changing. It's not a fixed sign. It's not like Taurus, right? That is very hard to change. But the moon, our sort of intuition, our sort of emotional body, was transiting over both this like deeply feminine wound and also this like ancient timeline that holds so much wisdom and so much karma over that same period, the same time that Mercury was stationing retrograde. When we transit things like the supergalactic center or the galactic center, these black holes that like sit beyond time and space, like time doesn't really exist, you know? We're connecting to like parallel realms, like other dimensions, other time space continuums, like the realm that sits beyond space and time, and this sort of like linear existence that it seems like we're in. And so it's much easier for information from like that Akashic field to come through in regards to other time periods. And so when Mercury transits the supergalactic center, we can kind of expect a lot of that to come through. And, you know, Atlantis had just finished its retrograde. It just transited the galactic center. So it really brought a lot of this stuff out. A lot of those activations were happening simultaneously with Mercury retrograde's other significant aspects early on in its cycle. And so this Atlantis narrative has kind of been part of this retrograde period. And so if you're having kind of like things come up that don't really make sense in this current time space continuum, like this could be where it's funneling in from, but really it could be legitimately anywhere because of this like kind of portal that Mercury, our analytical mind, is going to be transiting for the third time direct and going through that shadow in order to like clean up what it left behind ultimately. Okay, it's so hot, I need this fan. But like when I watch these videos back, I can legitimately hear it. And I know you guys say like it's not bad, but it drives me nuts. Hi, Amanda. Amanda says this Aries Libra axis makes so much sense for me right now. I just had a big conversation with my boss, a very fated relationship that was really positive about the direction of my job. Yes, see, exactly. That's what I was trying to talk about. Thank you for sharing that, Amanda. We'll be talking more about it in post full moon, but it was the illumination I set intentions for around the new moon. Yes, because we're at that 6 month culmination. Oh, I love it, Amanda. I love it. Okay, so we're going to skip on to tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow we were going to meet, but like I said, we're meeting on Friday. There's a couple of mistakes on this calendar, you guys. One, the full moon live is going to be tomorrow. And then also, where was it? Okay, so on the 20th, where it says the sun and Venus are conjunct the Andromeda Galaxy, that's not true. The sun and Venus are in opposition to the Andromeda Galaxy. I fixed it on the slide, but it's not fixed on the thing I uploaded for you guys on Patreon. Okay, so I'll do it like this. I think this will be better. Okay. All right, so tomorrow we have a couple of pretty significant things happening. I normally do not highlight trines yellow on the calendar as being like super important transits because trines are such free flowing harmonious aspects that oftentimes we don't really feel them. They bring benefit, they bring aid, and if like you want to go and look up your transits, you can kind of see like, oh yeah, I was having that like Mercury trine, oh yeah, my mind really was kind of like with it, you know. But they're normally not noticed so much as like conjunctions, oppositions, squares, which are more significant transits. Significant, right? But on the 6th, I definitely highlighted this one as being significant. Mercury trine Pluto retrograde. Because this is kind of two planets meeting to kind of like exchange information in a very harmonious way. So Mercury will be at like 25, later in the day, it'll be at 26 degrees of Virgo, trine Pluto at 26 degrees of Capricorn in the earth signs. So it's grounding in this deeply penetrating mind. So I have Mercury conjunct Pluto in my chart. This is a trine. It's a similar aspect. It's not as intense, but it's this mercurial, analytical thinking mind, analyzing mind in Virgo of the details, right? But we can sometimes in Virgo get too caught up on the details that we can't pierce through them and see the truth on the other side, right? And that's where Pluto comes into play. Pluto is the detective. He's the piercer. He's the only one who can go deep enough into the underworld to see. I have both these planets conjunct in fucking Mercury's home house and Pluto's home sign in Scorpio. It's why these videos are so deep and out there and penetrating. Like, I go deeper in the rabbit hole than anybody has any business being in. I can't help myself. This is how I am. And tomorrow we're all going to be having this energy of Mercury and Pluto working together. And this is working together right after Mercury stationed direct and right before Pluto stations direct. Pluto's retrograde right now, and so he's really going in deep within that internal underworld, right? Pluto's that detective. Like, he can solve mysteries and crimes in the real life, you know? He can pierce through the bullshit and see into the shadows of, like, the outside world. Especially in Capricorn, it really is the outside world, the corruption, and then like power systems within this sort of system and hierarchy that we live in. But when Pluto is retrograde, it's piercing into our own underworld, our inner world, right? And Pluto will station retrograde on the 8th, so 2 days after this trine. So tomorrow, these two planets are really working together to help us see. Now look to see what houses these are in. Where is Virgo? What house does Virgo fall in for you? What house does Capricorn fall in for you? You've had some little focus in these areas, both over Pluto's retrograde, so this deep transformation and diving deep within our personal underworld in order to have a sort of like death, rebirth, and transformation. And then also Mercury is trying to get this message through in the area that Virgo governs in your chart. What house? Virgo naturally governs the 6th house for Amanda, who's an Aries rising. It is the 6th house, which is the house of service and responsibilities and duties and details and organization and health and the body and the balance between our mind and our body. But for everybody else, it's somewhere different. For me, it's my 1st house of the self. I'm a Virgo rising. And so that's where this is kind of manifesting for me. This is the same day. So the same day that we have Mercury, our mind, our thinking process, trine, work harmoniously with Pluto, that penetrating, piercing detective that can get to the bottom of the underworld and transform it into the phoenix so it can be reborn. The same day that we have that trine, we also have Jupiter retrograde coming to its exact opposition with the supergalactic center. So not only do we have our analytical mind diving into the underworld, piercing through into the darkness with Pluto working harmoniously to get into our inner underworld, but we also have Jupiter, our expansive higher mind, right? This helps us to like understand. Mercury helps us to like think and question and like the process of understanding. But Jupiter is where we start to like know and grow and push beyond and move into the unknown realms, right? And so the same time that we have this trine, we have this opposition with that center point of our vast super cluster that, like I said, sits beyond this time-space continuum, is this sort of source of like chaos and singularity. And, you know, we have this sort of volatile energy like circulating around this, but it's this sort of like volatile energy, the same sort of volatile energy that eclipse season has that we'll be feeling later on in the month, it's this sort of volatile energy that kind of like pulls the rug out from underneath you in order for you to like go where you're supposed to be going, in order for like fate and destiny to kind of get a little footing and redirect you away from, you know, sort of distractions or just we've veered off the path somewhat. Eclipses come and really push us to where we're supposed to go in this sort of volatile way where things will fall apart, things will break away in order for what is truly in alignment to manifest. And black holes have that similar energy. Like if you are out of alignment and you have a lot of black holes in your chart, your life will be utter fucking chaos. Take it from somebody who has a lot. Utter fucking chaos. Utter fucking chaos. But once you get in sort of alignment with your soul's natural journey and where you're supposed to be directing your energy, this sort of feeling of singularity and balance and harmony and ease and beauty and creativity, all of these wonderful Venusian Libra archetypes can come through. Okay, so tomorrow's a big day. Find some way to take advantage of it. Could be a really great time. So this is also really nice that these are in the earth signs, okay? So like I said earlier, I have freaking Mercury conjunct Pluto in my chart in like all their home turfs, and it's like super intense. It's in Scorpio. Like it's intense. It's not grounded. It is just, it's too much sometimes, you know? What's nice is that this is actually happening in the earth signs. And so it has this sort of grounded energy about it where this can be used very practically. This can be used very practically, Virgo, in the real world in order to make changes in our physical seen reality, our physical earthly seen reality, as opposed to just, you know, these big metaphysical shifts that happen within, which is still very much happening, but a lot of this can then be pulled into this physical world to be used in practical ways of service, practical ways revolving around duty and responsibility and, you know, all the things that sometimes we aren't the best at. Okay, so on the 7th, I'm going to see you guys here in the chat. I see you guys saying some stuff. Aries, Libra, what? I'm a Libra with an Aries rising. I'm not Planet Unlimited. I'm not sure when you hopped in, but if you like watch back the beginning, maybe after we're done here, I talk about the Aries Libra axis and how the sun for much of this month is in Libra, but the earth, which sits opposite the sun, is actually transiting in the sky through Aries. It will later move into Taurus. And this is where our full moon is. This is where our new moon is. And so we always have a polarity activated, an axis activated. We never just have one sign. You know, it's never just Libra season, Scorpio season, Sag season. It's always the two of them. They're never apart. They're connected. And that's kind of like my jam. I'm always trying to make that point. She lives for the rabbit holes. Okay, cool. All right, so on the 7th, the sun at 15 degrees of Libra will sit opposite Chiron. Chiron retrograde in Aries, the sign of the self. So Chiron represents our wounds, but not just any wounds, the wounds that hold the wisdom and the medicine that we need to heal and become wise and step into a sort of healer role where we can then use this wisdom to like help others around us in whatever realm, you know, that falls in. We all have Chiron in a different place. For example, my Chiron is in Gemini in the 10th house. So like I'm literally supposed to be the 10th house is the purpose of like the house of purpose and career and mission. So I'm literally supposed to be like the wounded healer as a career option. I'm do this now. Before I did this, I was a drug and alcohol counselor. And what's interesting is the wound. So like the chironic wound in Gemini represents the wound of the mind, right? And when I was a young child, they definitely convinced me that my mind was less than par, diagnosed me with all this stuff. And that was this wound that I had to work through in order to now use my mind for others. And so looking to see where Chiron falls in your own chart will help you to understand your personal wound and how you can alchemize that into wisdom and then use that to help guide others like Chiron did. Chiron trained pretty much all of the heroes of Greek mythology, like pretty much all of them. And then he, traded himself in order to free Prometheus, which represents the knowledge for mankind to be sovereign, right? So on the 7th, the sun, our solar consciousness, our vitality, our light, will be sitting in opposition to Chiron in this realm of the self. So Chiron has been transiting through Aries for a really long time. I meant to look up when he moved in here. I think it was like 2018. I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can Google it and put it in the chat. I can't remember, but it feels like he's been here for freaking ever, and he's only at 14 degrees. This retrograde was really digging deeper into the self, but it's that like integration. So when Chiron is direct, he's like exposing the wounds we didn't even know we had, all of these things we didn't even know existed. When he's retrograde and he's going back over that area a second time, he's like, okay, I showed you that shit. Now we're going to integrate it, right? And then like integrate that sort of like do the work to process it, right? So when he's direct, he's exposing it. When he's retrograde, you're doing the work to like work through it, the sort of like trauma work, integration work, right? And then when he's direct for the third time, going over it that final time, that's when we unlock the wisdom that these wounds hold. And so right now in this retrograde period, he's still very focused on like the actual healing, right? When we have our full moon on the 9th, which will sit conjunct this point, it'll be an illumination of a lot of that healing we've already done and really help us to step into that next level. But it's still like halfway through a cycle. We're still really in the alchemical soup ultimately, right? And so tomorrow we can really pierce through and see the sun is our light. It's sitting in opposition to Chiron, which is retrograde in the sign of the self. We're focusing on those like core wounds that revolve around identity, that revolve around our ability to take action, have a lot to do with our motivation, the masks we wear, who we are, right? And the sun will be shining on these wounds, really making them very clear, just in time for the full moon, which will fall right in alignment with that same point, illuminating, healing, and integrating what this has kind of been about for quite some time. Okay, so before we get to our new moon on the 9th, on the 8th, Pluto stations direct. So Pluto at 26 degrees of Capricorn stations direct, like a degree away from America's Pluto, and it's going to then transit America's Pluto for the third and final time. And so we are in no way over this sort of Pluto return of the system, but we are simultaneously having a rebirth of the self and our own authority and our own sovereignty and our own system, which is what Capricorn governs after this Pluto retrograde cycle. So you can definitely expect fuckery to start to transpire again. in this realm. You know, when we had our first America Pluto return, like within days, Russia invaded Ukraine. Right now, around this stationing, we have Ukraine trying to join NATO. And if they do, like, that's legitimately World War III. Like, if any NATO country is fired upon, all the other NATO countries have to go and fight for them. So Ukraine joining NATO, like, legitimately starts World War III. We also have that pipeline fiasco that they are blaming Russia for, but I'm pretty sure it was probably our own government, since we love to stage things like that. And so we see this sort of energy of like this tension, this power. Pluto governs power. Power shifts, power grabs. Pluto returning to where it was at the time that America was born, literally signals like the end of one power structure and the start of another. You know, we see like the death of America and the start of the New World Order type of scenario. So when we have these specific dates, the stationings, and then the transiting forward and hitting the Pluto again, you know, this is not a huge like prediction. It's pretty obvious that this is the trajectory that we're heading into, and you know, we might see some big moves being made, especially once Pluto stations direct. It's on a Saturday, so you know, maybe the Friday before or the Monday before, but you know, I wouldn't be surprised if something happens on like that specific day when it comes to power, the elites, the system, and these sort of hierarchies, or the shifting from one to another. Okay, so on the 9th is the Aries new moon. We're going to meet on Friday for it over on Patreon, but the moon isn't until the 9th. It falls at 16 degrees of Aries. It's not exact here because I can't change the time to be exact for every single transit. We'd be here forever. But it falls with the sun at 16 degrees of Libra, conjunct the asteroid Psyche. We actually have the sun, Venus, and Mercury all transiting over the asteroid Psyche this month. They're green on the little chart. If you guys want to look at them, we'll talk about them as they come. But Psyche represents these like deep psychic wounds. So while Chiron represents these like core wounds, sometimes these can be physical. Like sometimes these can be like, you know, you are disabled in some way, or, you know, you physically hurt yourself in some physical way. It could be a sickness. It could be physical ailments. You know what I mean? The Psyche asteroid is specifically psychic wounds and specifically rooted in the feminine narrative. They also have a lot to do with the relationship dynamics. We're going to talk all about her mythology on Friday when we meet, so I'm not going to get too deep into it now. But in short, the Psyche mythology revolves around this like star-crossed relationship that ultimately triggers her into this deep internal reflection that ultimately takes her as the first human being in Greek mythology to ascend to godhood and become immortal and like start to live on like Mount Olympus, but through all these harsh trials, tribulations, and like the integration of these like deep psychic feminine wounds and the unlocking of our feminine power in the process. Like she devoted herself to Artemis in the woods and was like celibate and like unlocked the goddess within ultimately, but after like a whole bunch of like really tragic things. So the sun will be conjunct this in Libra, the sign of relationships, also conjunct Venus, the planet of relationships, all here in Libra. Psyche also legitimately represents relationships. She fell in love with Eros. Okay, maybe I'll tell a little bit of the mythology. So Psyche was very beautiful. She was like the most beautiful human. And Aphrodite, who was just a total bitch, like all of the main gods and goddesses were just awful human beings, or gods. But Aphrodite was, of course, jealous because they always got like that And she was jealous that Psyche was so beautiful and taking all of the attention away from her. So Aphrodite, which is literally Venus, the goddess of love, decided that she was going to send her son Eros, or Cupid, to shoot Psyche with an arrow and make her fall in love with this like hideous beast. But when Eros went to do that, he saw her and was like, damn, she is hot. And so he fell in love with her instead. And then they had this like a weird sort of romance where like he like whisked her off away to, I don't know if it was like a dark room or if she was like blindfolded, but they were like lovers for a long time, but she could never look at him. And long story short, she eventually looked at him and then they had to be separated. And then she went through all of this like diving into the self and the healing and the alchemization and all of these different trials and tribulations that Aphrodite, the goddess of love, sent her way. She passed them all of these initiations with the help of many other gods and goddesses who kind of like felt bad for her and were sending her aid, all of these different archetypal figures. And through this long tragic story, she ultimately was the first human being to ascend to immortality and godhood. So this tells us that the interaction of us with other people, the act of romance, the act of love, the act of interaction with other people is ultimately what leads us on this path of enlightenment and immortality. And we'll talk about this more when we over on Patreon, right? So this moon, and not only is this at the time of this moon, the sun conjunct Psyche and Venus or Aphrodite, but the moon is conjunct Chiron, that sort of wounded self. And so this illumination, this full moon illumination is really happening on top of those deep core internal wounds that revolve around our identity. Ultimately, our identity when it comes to other people, like who are we and who are they and where do we and they, how can I develop myself while being in a partnership, while being in a collective consciousness, right? And what kind of wounds have I taken on that prevent me from embodying who I truly am? These are all things that will be coming up around this moon. Not only is the moon going to be conjunct Chiron, it's also going to be really close to the asteroid Sphinx, which is also retrograde. The Sphinx represents the mystery, the riddle, the unknown, this sort of like deep mystic truth that is, like a puzzle. And it's not really as it seems on the surface. And it requires us to, go into this sort of retrograde realm in order to truly unlock and understand. But that like riddle of our wounds is going to be illuminated here in just a couple of days. If you guys want to dive in more, we're going to be talking all about the Andromeda mythology, and this concept of like alchemy and divine partnership and divine healing, and the mythologies of not only like Andromeda, her parents, that whole thing, but we'll also be touching on the Psyche mythology as well on Friday. Okay, so on the 10th, Daisy says that her Chiron is in Aries in the 8th house. So you are in the midst of your Chiron return. It happens around the time we turn 50. But like Chiron takes a long time to transit through Aries, so it may not be at the same degree. But the 8th house is the house of the occult. It's the house of astrology. It's the house of like death, rebirth, transformation, the veiled mysteries, and like the deep internal workings of our psyche. So you could really unlock a lot, Daisy, at this time. That's a really profound placement for this moon. Okay, wait, she says it's in Taurus in the 8th house. Okay, so same thing when it comes to all the occult, blah, 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 and stuff like that, and transformation. So for you, your transformation is not supposed to be as, like, intense and balls to the wall as Chiron, as Aries is, but it's more grounded and practical, like Taurus, and it's rooted more in the senses and the physical realm. That really helps you to transform all of the earthly senses and all of that which our physical reality has to offer us. Food, plants, anything that tickles our senses, sound, taste, touch, things like that can really help you to transform. And then just like practical occultism, like practical diving into the realm of the spirit, of the mysteries, right? Will help you to transform. Leslie has Aries in the second house. And so a lot of your Chiron transiting through the second house right now for you in Aries, these wounds of the self revolve around like self-worth, resources, finances, and the ability to kind of like support ourselves and have a sort of like solid foundation. Okay. We talked about, so on the 10th, Venus will then oppose Chiron. So we had the sun do it, and now Venus is doing it in the realm, its own realm, Libra, the realm of relationships, opposite Chiron in the realm of the self. So again, like I said, it's just transit after transit after transit of wounds of the self and the relationship and the illuminating of them and the alchemizing of them, like all month. On both this like traditional level and also the galactic level with the Andromeda galaxy as well, but we'll get there in a little bit. Okay, so Venus comes in, and that sort of planet of relationships really aligns with that. So we're really going to be feeling this not just the ninth, the day of the moon, right? But the days leading up to it, the days leading after it. Really, it's the whole month. It's the whole month has this sort of energy about it. Mercury then re-enters Libra on that same day on the 10th. And so then now our mind is now focused more on others. When before it was transited back into Virgo to focus on healing and health and diet and the restructuring of our organizational faculties, our duties, our responsibilities, how we are in service, right? Well, now our mind is leaning into Libra again. It was here before it stationed retrograde. And so it's transiting over this for a third time. And so our mind is focused on the other. And so as you can see, we have our mind, our heart ultimately, and our light, our egoic consciousness, all here in Libra, the sign of others. And so it can get very easy to fall into the realm of other people and have your month be consumed with the other and completely neglect the self. As you can see, everything over here is retrograde. We have Jupiter retrograde. We have the Sphinx, that mystery, that riddle, retrograde. We have Chiron retrograde, and we have Eris, the planet of chaos and discord and change, ultimately, all retrograde, all in the sign of the self. So in order to access any of these, we have to go inward. And to go inward, we have to go inward into the self, this polarity that's so easily forgotten when we're focused only on the sun, right? If we don't celebrate the new moon or the full moon, like if you don't follow the moon cycles, like you're not paying attention to this sign at all during this time. But really, not only do we have the full moon in the opposite sign of whatever season it is, so in Libra season the full moon is in Aries, but we also have the earth transiting through this sign throughout the whole time that the sun is transiting through the opposite sign. This is activated all month until we move into Scorpio, and then this will be activated. It's always like this at all the times. But it's easy to lean into here where we can see where our focus is, where our sun is, right? The moon, you can think of the moon as being over here because that's where our full moon will ultimately be. And so this is more of the unseen realm. This requires us to go inward. It requires us to be still. It requires us to consider the other side of the story, right? Okay. So Mercury will enter Libra all of these signs are going to be in Libra. It's going to be very easy to focus only on others. Don't do that, you know? Like, do it, integrate it, but constantly think of this axis that's activated, this illumination, culmination, and harvest time within the area of the self. And we're starting new stories, new chapters, new beginnings in this area of others, right? But this is really the part of the sky that's culminating and peaking at this time, that's being illuminated, where we are able to harvest the rewards of that which we've worked at over the past 6 months. Like Amanda said, what she manifested 6 months ago is coming to fruition. Pay attention, because this is what's coming to fruition, and a lot of it revolves around the healing work that we've done and the unlocking, Chiron, the key, unlocking of the wisdom that it held. Okay. We talked about the sun will be exactly conjunct Psyche on the 10th too, as well. And so that's really piercing into those psychic wounds and the power that they hold in these psychic wounds and how they manifest within our relationship dynamics, ultimately. How these chironic wounds of the self and these psychic wounds that many times are caused by others, our interaction with others and what we take on because of said interactions with others, how these long-held psychic wounds ultimately manifest within our modern day relationships. We can really get a lot of insight into that on the 10th. The same day that Venus opposes Chiron retrograde, Mercury, the planet of the mind and the message, enters Libra, the sign of relationships, and the sun conjuncts Psyche, those psychic wounds. The 10th is a day to pierce in and see as well. And also like trigger things up in order to work through. So kind of keep that in mind too. It's going to be an intense month. We're heading into eclipse season. It's going to be crazy. Okay, on the 11th, Mars will be in a square to Neptune retrograde. It's slowly been moving into the square to Neptune retrograde. We've been kind of feeling this. When Mars squares Neptune, it's like we are very tired and otherworldly and like plugged into the psychic realm and not so much into the physical realm. And there's a lot of like illusion and confusion afoot, right? But Neptune is retrograde. So when Neptune is retrograde, it's piercing through that veil of illusion and confusion. It's cutting through the fog in order to help us see. It's in the realm, its home sign of Pisces that literally governs the fog, the confusion, the illusion, the spell, that sort of realm of Maya, dream, and forgetfulness, but also the sort of mystic truths that sits on the other side of the illusion, right? And when Neptune is retrograde, we can see clearly. When planets come into a square with each other, they have these sort of like conflicting desires that are seeking resolution in some way. And this resolution requires action. Action needs to be taken. Mars is literally the planet of action. And so you're going to feel a sort of like tension around the 11th that forces action to be taken because of the new truths that are coming through, because of the illusions that we're starting to see through. Then these illusions revolve very heavily around the spiritual realm. Spirituality, mysticism, the realm of the unseen, the realm of the unconscious, the realm of dreams, the realm of inspiration, the realm of the vision, right? And the realm of the collective unconscious, where a lot of things bubble up that, I would like, aren't necessarily ours, as in like the identity that you took on in this lifetime, but are ours as a collective consciousness, because, you know, we are all one type of a thing. Okay, so Mars will square Neptune retrograde on the 11th. Some sort of action is going to have to be taken, but it's going to feel like you really can't because of that sort of square energy. This action may not necessarily be fully taken until after Mars retrograde is over. So Mars is currently at 23 degrees of Gemini. It is going to station retrograde on what, the 30th? I think it's the 30th. Yes, on the 30th. It's going to station retrograde on the 30th. And it's going to transit over this area of Gemini for 3 times. It's already done it once. It's going to go back. I'm going to go back again. It's going to be here for like 7.5 months. Okay, these are the dates. Mars retrograde is officially from October 30th to January 12th. But we really have this sort of like pre-shadow where Mars is transiting this way. And then we have the retrograde. And then we have the post-shadow where it transits it for the 3rd and final time. So the pre-shadow started back in September on the 3rd. And the post-shadow doesn't end until March 15th, 2023. So we're really having this area focused on so heavily until March of 2023. And so this Mars square is going to happen 3 times. And this is the first of those 3 squares. So the action we can't really fully take, we're not really fully going to take until later. But this is where that sort of tension and trigger starts to transpire in order for us to take it. Mars retrograde over this 7.5 months, Mars is the planet of drive, motivation, attention. Look to see where Gemini falls in your chart, because this is where this is going to be falling for the next, like I said, 7.5 to 8 months. And so we're really being asked to restructure, reconfigure, redirect our attention, our action, and our motivation. Gemini has a lot to do with communication networks, like even like technology. So this can be an area of focus for many of you over this time, redirecting where you focus your attention when it comes to these sort of networks of communication, the influx of information that Gemini governs as well, and this sort of like realm of duality. Now, looking to see what house Gemini falls in will help. For me, Gemini is my 10th house. So I already know that I'm going to be like restructuring how I'm all over the place, you guys. I am all over the place when it comes to like all of the different things that I'm doing. There's things that I need to make, like these courses and all of these things people keep asking me for. And this book I keep saying that I'm writing. And then like all of these different avenues where my energy is leaking out. I definitely, over this Mars retrograde cycle, I'm going to be like reconfiguring all of that. Now for you, this could be falling somewhere else. You know, this could be in your 4th house of the home, of the subconscious, of the mother, of our early life trauma. And your action and your motivation and your drive can be being focused in this area and asking you to, you know, give it some attention and reconfigure how it is you take action in this area of existence, right? So looking to see where Gemini falls is really significant. This Mars-Neptune square, like I said, is the first of 3. So we're going to be like triggered to take action when it comes to these new truths in general that are coming through to us. But like the full action isn't really going to be fully on its way until later, you know? Okay, so that's cool. So the same day that we have this Mars trining Neptune, right? Neptune breaking through the realm of illusions, Mars having us focus our mind and attention in more aligned ways because of what it is that's coming through. We also have the Sun trining Saturn retrograde on that day. So Saturn is also going to station direct later this month on the 22nd, but on the 11th, the Sun will trine it. And so that's really giving our consciousness some insight into what this Saturn retrograde cycle is about. If you have your Saturn in Aquarius, this is your Saturn return. So this is a really big one for you. And this trine to the Sun is really helping you to see like what that has been about. But we've all had Saturn retrograde in whatever house Aquarius governs. Saturn has a lot to do with our authority, with like hard work and like the building of our mountain, whatever that may be. It has a lot to do with karma, it has a lot to do with soul work. It has a lot to do with like harsh confrontations with reality. Reality is coming through very clearly. Harsh confrontations with reality that teach us like those hard life lessons that force us to take responsibility and step into our own authority. When it's in Aquarius, it has a lot to do with the collective and the collective mindsets and collective ideologies. And Saturn has a lot to do with boundaries. And when Saturn is retrograde, we are restructuring our boundaries around the collective mind and all the different groups within the collective mind. And Aquarius also has a lot to do with like our visions and our hopes and our dreams for the future, right? So a lot of this is coming through. And on the 11th, it will be trining our sun. And so we'll be able to see a little bit about what this was right before Saturn stations direct and then transits over that area for that third and final time, getting the message and doing that hard work that it just uncovered, right? The work that needed to be done that it didn't even know needed to be done. For example, Aquarius for me falls in my 6th house, which is the house of like responsibilities and duties and like cleaning your house and shit, which is like, you know, my nemesis. God, so bad. So yeah, I know that that's what this whole Saturn cycle is about. And I promise I will do some laundry and some dishes before Saturn kicks my ass, which he will do if you do not do whatever it is you're supposed to be doing. So look and see what area this is for you, because Saturn is about to station direct and he will kick your ass if you don't get the message he tried to bestow upon you. Okay. Where am I at? Okay, the 12th. Okay, so the 12th is one of those really significant days. On the 12th, Mercury will transit the supergalactic center for that third and final time, and it will oppose Jupiter retrograde at the same time. So we have our lower mind and our higher mind, but our higher mind is very internalized right now, focusing on internal expansion. And our lower mind and our higher mind will both be plugged in with our super galactic mind. Like, you know, black holes are suns. Suns are solar consciousness, but a black hole is a sun that has lived out its entire life, gone supernova, pierced the fabric of space-time, right? And moved on to something else. It's an advanced sun. It's an advanced consciousness. And this advanced consciousness sits at the center of our super galaxy. So both our lower mind and our higher mind will not only be plugged into the entire Milky Way galaxy, the entire Andromeda galaxy, but 130 other galaxies on the 12th. If you care about exacts, which I do, especially if I'm doing like a candle ritual or something like that, like I really do care about this stuff. But like maybe you do not have a Virgo Mars and maybe you could care less about the exact time this happens. But if you do, I will tell you. It's 12:31 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. 12:31 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Mercury will make this third and final pass with the SGC in opposition to Jupiter. That would be a time to like sit in silence, meditate, do some sort of like intentional painting or drawing, or I make a lot of sigils. I really like a lot of sigils, and I'll like channel sigils at specific times because it's like channeling in that energy into something physical and tangible that you can have like forever, and you can always revisit it when you want to plug into this center point of our vast cosmic mind and have that center point aligned with your analytical mind, your higher mind, and this access of the self and others. Okay. On the 13th, we meet for the second episode of Books and Buds, where we are reading this book, The Sign of the Serpent, and we're going to dive back into that book on the 13th, so come and join us. If you missed the first episode, I linked it down below in the, oh my god, there's so much highlighting in this book. It's a really good book, you guys. I'm excited to dive back into it. The first episode is linked down below, so if you want to catch up on the book we are reading, it's linked down below. And you know, I have like so many tangents where I'm just like going off and talking about Atlantis and all kinds of crazy things, so I don't know how many episodes. We didn't read that much. We only read like 26 pages. But there was a lot of like chatting and talking and whatnot. So we're gonna dive back in. It might be several episodes, but this book is very rare and out of print. So I'm excited to read it on the internet. Leslie says, "Yay, Books and Buds." I love Books and Buds. I'm glad you guys are liking it. Okay, so Venus comes into a trine with Saturn retrograde on the 13th. So the sun came into that trine before and helped us to kind of like see all this like work we're supposed to be doing, right? And now Venus comes into that trine as well on the 13th. The same day that it conjuncts Psyche. So we already talked about how Psyche has that energy of like psychic wounds and relationships, but also this path to ultimate immortality. But this path of immortality is ultimately only found through the self, not the partnership dynamic, but that is a trigger. It is a catalyst that then forces us into the self. Ultimately, that's what the Psyche tale tells us. And this trine towards Saturn retrograde. And so it will, you know, help us to set, it's harmonious, it's trine, it's working easily together. Venus, our planet of relationships and the sign of relationships. Saturn, our planet of like karma and hard work and responsibility and boundaries in Aquarius, the sign that governs friends and the collective consciousness as a whole. And so we have this sort of trine happening on the 13th. It's going to have us setting boundaries and restructuring our boundaries when it comes to the collective consciousness in order to have more energy to funnel into the development of the self and the healing and alchemization of these like psychic wounds that manifest within our relationships. Right? And so it's showing us the boundaries that need to be set within the vastness of it all in order to make right our innermost world, ultimately. The moon is conjunct Chiron, is conjunct Orion on that day. Not really going over a lot of the lunar transits this month. We are going to dive super deep into the moons, but yeah, we'll be here forever. Like I said, I mostly make this calendar for me, and then I just started, so I know all of the stuff, you know? And I started like putting it out there for you guys. I don't know if any of you guys even use it. I know that Sharon uses it. I use it. So that's all that matters to me. Okay, so on the 17th, the sun will trine Mars. So this is another day that triggers that sort of Martian energy of action. This also triggers like aggression and rage and anger and frustration. And, you know, the sun will be working harmoniously with Mars. Mars represents all of those things that I just listed. And so that sort of vibe will be funneling in to our relationships. But Mars also governs passion and drive and motivation and that sort of energy that fights for what we value, right? So Venus is conjunct the sun at this time. It's exact on the next day or something. When is it? Oh, it's exact on the 22nd, but it's pretty close on this day. So Venus and Mars are like astrology's like star-crossed lovers, right? Venus represents love and money and values, and Mars represents passion and how we fight for what we value. And there will be in a trine at this time, so they're working harmoniously with each other to take actions in alignment with our values. And this will have a lot to do with like mental energy. This is falling in Gemini and Libra, air signs that revolve around communication and interaction with other people, mental interaction, communicative interaction. And when we have these interactions, we ultimately have projections and shadows arise and psychic wounds triggered. And so this month is really showing us that dynamic in order for us to kind of like dive in and work through some of these things. And we have, you know, simultaneously some squares that are triggering things to come up from the surface, but we also have these trines that are helping us take the action that's needed. The month is like slightly chaotic, but in the most orchestrated, like divinely orchestrated way that like I'm not really worried about it. I think it's going to all turn out great, but you know, we all need a little bit of chaos sometimes. Okay. So the sun trines Mars on the 17th, and Venus makes its trine to Mars on the 18th. So as you can see, this sort of like relationship dynamic is just throughout the whole month. Whether it's this oppositions between Libra and Aries, the ruling sign of Mars and the ruling sign of Venus, or the trines to those planets, or any of the other aspects we've talked about, it's the entire month. This is what the month is about, right? Okay, so we've made it to the 19th. Oh, it's only 10:28. I'm doing pretty good, you guys. Okay. Let's see if we can finish this in 2 hours. Okay, so on the 19th, I have a bunch of things happening on the 19th, actually. The 19th is a big day. The sun squares Pluto. Venus squares Pluto because the sun and Venus are conjunct. And Mercury opposes Chiron. So the sun conjunct Venus in Libra has obviously a lot to do with our relationships. We've been talking all about that. Square Pluto, that is a forced action in regards to transformation, in regards to alchemical transformation, in regards to piercing through and transforming what we can see. This square that's going to be like kind of forcing us to take some sort of action. Again, it has a lot to do with our authority. And it also has a lot to do with like passions and power and things like that. Pluto square Venus can like manifest 2 different ways. So it can either manifest as like power struggles in relationships that are like intense, very intense. Pluto is very intense. Or very passionate relationships that we are triggered into action in order to solidify that sort of intense passion more. You know, it can manifest both ways. Squares aren't necessarily bad. Squares are triggers that force us into action. And when we have Venus square Pluto that is an alchemical action revolving around the transformation of our relationships, ultimately. This alchemical action revolving around the transformation of our relationships is happening the same day that Mercury, our mind, our messenger, in Libra, the sign of others and relationships, sits opposite our wounds, our self wounds, our wounds deep within the recesses of our animalistic psyche, ultimately. So these are being triggered simultaneously. And so ultimately the transformation is tied to these wounds that were just illuminated for us at the full moon. So we should have some idea of what this is around that time. Plus Mercury retrograde just opposed this 3 times, helping us to pull that through as well. Actually, it didn't get all the way back here. It didn't oppose it 3 times because it only got to 8 degrees. But it almost did. It got close. Okay, so on the 20th, if you guys are a Patreon member, this is one of the ones that's a typo. It says that the Sun and Venus are conjunct the Andromeda Galaxy. That's not true. They are in opposition to the Andromeda Galaxy. So the Sun in Libra, the sign of relationships, conjunct Venus, the planet of relationships, will be conjunct and in opposition to the Andromeda black hole, which falls at 27 degrees of Aries. This is that galactic aspect of divine partnership. So we talked about, Libra and Venus and all of this stuff here in regular astrology. Well, we have this sort of dynamic playing out in galactic astrology as well. The Andromeda Galaxy, this black hole, will one day merge with our galaxy's black hole, the galactic center. The Andromeda Galaxy and the Milky Way Galaxy are shooting towards each other in space, and they are going to collide and create a super galaxy. Both the Andromeda mythology, which we're going to dive into later this month, and the literal astronomy speak to divine fated collisions that help us to transform into something bigger. The Andromeda mythology speaks a lot to these collisions, helping us to break the chains that bind us, that are often rooted in generational and ancestral karma and trauma, our lineage, our bloodlines. And this sort of Andromeda opposition to Libra and Venus has a lot to do with our heart, has a lot to do with love, and this energy of galactic love or cosmic love or something that sits beyond emotions and is that sort of energy or essence of love itself, right? And so I wrote on the thumbnail that this month, especially around the 20th into the 21st, so the Sun and Venus will be in opposition to this galactic point on both the 20th and the 21st, because it happens right around midnight. And then their exact conjunction is on the 22nd. So really from the 20th to the 22nd, we're having these huge heart chakra activations and expansions and just portals opening to this source of galactic love, galactic collisions, this alchemization of 2 galaxies ultimately becoming one, which is the same thing that happens here in our reality where 2 people, become one. It actually happens more in Scorpio, whether we have the reproductive process, 2 people ultimately creating a third, Okay. On the 21st, we meet for our Eclipse live stream. The eclipse isn't until the 25th, but I'm going to do the video on the 21st. So come and join us. We are going to dive all into the history of Samhain and the rituals and history connected to the time of Halloween or the high holiday known as Samhain or third harvest. And we're also going to talk all about eclipses. I have dove into eclipses before, and like a lot of the like technical aspects to them, you know, how they create like a spiral throughout time. I've dove into so many different aspects of eclipses, and I've gotten a couple of new books on eclipses, so I'm sure I'll find some new things. But we're going to dive on the 21st all into eclipses and Samhain, and this really powerful solar eclipse that's in Scorpio on the 25th. That actually, we'll get there in a second, but it's making some interesting aspects. So if you want to come and join us, you can join Patreon down below, you know, sliding scale, all that jazz. Okay, on the 22nd, that's right. Okay, so on the 22nd, Mercury trines Saturn while it's still retrograde. So right here it has an S. That means it's stationed. It's like pretty much standing still. But Mercury trines it before it stations. When it's still retrograde, Mercury makes that trine to Saturn. Then later that day, Saturn stations direct and Venus conjuncts the sun opposite the Andromeda galaxy. And so we have the message and the messenger and our mind and our ability to process information all in this realm of relationships, right? Coming to a trine with Saturn retrograde at the end of its retrograde cycle, giving us some sort of message. Some sort of message is coming through to the messenger in regards to all of what Saturn was up to over there. Looking to see what house this is will help you to know where that's coming from. And then Saturn will station direct. And it's like, okay, you got the message, and now you need to do the fucking work. And then Saturn transiting through its shadow period, going over this area for the third and final time, is when the work is done. And so we're really stepping into a lot of work here over the coming months. And the restructuring of our energy and attention in order to focus on the soul work we came here to do for the collective, for our future, Aquarius. And like I said, this is all happening the same day that Venus is conjunct the sun and opposite the Andromeda galaxy, expanding our heart, expanding our relationships, connecting us to this sort of like galactic partner, right? That is like, you know, sometimes we see that manifested outside with another person ultimately, but really this galactic partner is found within. This is an inner alchemical process of our feminine polarity, Andromeda, and our masculine polarity, the Milky Way, right? Or the sun and the moon, light and dark, yin and yang, whatever you want to refer to it as. Okay. So both Venus and the sun enter Scorpio together on the 23rd. And this is when we really start to solidify these relationships. I always say, like, Libra, I have a bunch of Scorpio placements and a bunch of Libra placements. Libra represents, like, because of Venus, you know, they say, like, Libra is the sign of love. Well, actually, they say that Leo is the sign that governs like romance and like love and passionate love. Libra governs intellectual love. It's an air sign. It's dissociative. It doesn't really feel a lot. It's focused on mental relationships, the like tickling of our mind. You know what I mean? Lots of talking, lots of communicating, on a mental level. This is why it governs not only relationships, but also business partnerships and interactions with people on whatever sort of level. Scorpio, on the other hand, Scorpio governs those deep, intense, alchemical relationships that are penetrating, and intense is like the best word that I can use for it. We're going to be entering into Scorpio eclipse season. One of the eclipses is actually conjunct Venus. The eclipse is conjunct Venus. And so it's a scorpionic eclipse conjunct, solar eclipse conjunct Venus, the planet of relationships. This Libra season was really preparing us for the alchemical union, and with both the whatever divine partner, but also the mysteries, the other side, the realm of our own unconscious mind that will then transpire over Scorpio season, which officially kicks off on the 23rd. Right after the Sun and Venus enter Scorpio, which literally governs that sort of like shadowy, mysterious realm of like the unconscious. It's like our unconscious as opposed to the collective unconscious. Right after that happens, on the next day, on the 24th, Mercury will conjunct Psyche. So remember I said both the Sun, Venus, and Mercury all transit this point this month. Mercury is the last to do so. The messenger, the relayer of information, our mental faculties will transit over the psychic wound and the sort of path of enlightenment and immortality that this psychic wound is here to direct us towards ultimately, and how it manifests within our relationships. That sort of message will come through on the 24th, right before the eclipse. So we have the Sun and Venus in Scorpio preparing for that eclipse. And then both Mercury and the Moon actually transit over Psyche the day before. And then on the 25th, we have our Scorpio solar eclipse, which falls at 2 degrees of Scorpio. It's like right on top of my Venus and right on top of my Mercury and my Pluto in the 3rd house. That should be fun. It might be like a rabbit hole time, who knows, because that always takes me so deep. Scorpio season. Okay, so the eclipse is exact on the 25th. It's at 2 degrees, and it's conjunct not only Venus, but also Alexandria. So a solar eclipse is like a new moon on steroids, right? It's a new moon that falls close enough to the nodes to eclipse. The south node and the north node are the intersection points of the orbits of the sun and the moon from Earth's perspective. So they're where our polarities cross. We could have a new moon in another sign, and the sun and moon would be not fully aligned. They only align by the nodes. That's where eclipses transpire. When we have eclipses, fate and destiny take the reins, right? Things get a little chaotic, but they're pushing us into where we're supposed to go. This is a really big new beginning that has the opportunity to unlock a lot of lost esoteric wisdom. Okay, so we have Alexandria here, which is representative of the Library of Alexandria from ancient Egypt, which housed all these old scrolls of like all this lost wisdom. Some say that it burned and was destroyed. Others apparently say that that's not true. It didn't burn. There was like a couple little fires, but they weren't really a big deal. People say that everybody just stopped caring, and the papyrus needed to be constantly rescribed because it didn't last long, and so everything just kind of slowly got lost to time. And then of course Rome came, took what they wanted to the Vatican, and left everything else in shambles ultimately. So either it represents this lost knowledge that was burned and lost to time, or this lost knowledge that was forgotten to time because nobody cared anymore. But it's in Scorpio, which literally represents the esoteric, the realm of the mysteries, the other side of the veil, the realm of the occult, astrology. And this eclipse, the sun, moon, and Venus are all going to be conjunct this point. And so this is really starting a new chapter, a huge portal opening up to this lost esoteric wisdom. but it's lost esoteric wisdom that we cannot access unless we make right our relationship dynamics with other people, ultimately. And it's conjunct the South Node, which houses a lot of like karmic debris rooted in the past. Rooted in the past of this incarnation, rooted in the past of other incarnations, the past. All of the wisdom from the past and also all of the like karmic debris of the past bubbles up from this surface, bubbles up from this point in order for us to work through. But the good thing is that in Scorpio, the more you dive in and work through, the more you transform into that sort of like enlightened phoenix, right? That has been reborn through the fires of the self, ultimately. But it's not just the self, it's our interactions, our deep, personal, intimate interactions with other people that trigger this. Okay. On the 26th, Andrea says, my life went so wrong since the past eclipses that I'm so intrigued what these next ones will be all about. So that's another thing that I should point out. As you can see, the nodes are at about 13 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio. So they're about halfway through the signs. So we're about halfway through this Taurus Scorpio eclipse cycle that lasts about 18 months. So we're at this sort of like peak part of the story. So a lot of it has been distraction, getting rid of like all of the stuff that was standing in our way. And this next half is going to be the pushing us into the new direction. So that's totally in alignment, Andrea. It makes a lot of sense that your life went wrong because eclipses come to kind of like shake everything up and get us put on the right path. I was born smack dab in the middle of eclipse season with my son on the nodes. Like my life is like that. Like my life is just utter chaos if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Leslie says, I love October, all these energies. Got to go. I'm excited to listen to the rest and it really harnessed these energies. Thank you. Bye, Leslie. Thank you for coming. Okay, so on the 26th, Mercury trines Mars. So Mercury now comes into that trine with Mars that both the Sun and Venus did earlier in the month. So that sort of messenger is at this tail end of this sort of transiting party here, and it's gotten some messages, right, through its retrograde cycle, through its interactions with Saturn, and now it's coming into a trine with Mars, that planet of action, that planet of drive, of motivation. And so the 26th is a good day to, take action when it comes to whatever was bubbled up around that eclipse. We may be forced into some actions after that eclipse, but it definitely revolves around information and interaction with other people. But it also has a lot to do with our mental space, our mental energy, where we direct our attention. Because we're really being asked to direct it more like, okay, so we're entering into the dark half of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere, right? So the sun just transited through Libra, which is the closest we get to about balance, right? Here at the equinox is when we're balanced between light and dark. And now as we go, we get darker and darker and darker. The days shorten, the nights lengthen. And at the peak of winter solstice is when we reach our peak darkness, and then we slowly start to integrate light again until we reach that balance at the spring equinox, and then from there we're in the realm of light. So right now we're in the realm of the goddess, we're in the realm of darkness, we're in the realm of the unconscious, of our inner world, which is where we're meant to be going. And so this sort of trine between Mercury and Mars on the 26th is really having that message be delivered to Mars that we were already kind of feeling as Venus and the Sun made that same trine, but that message being delivered to Mars, the planet of action, to help us redirect our attention and our energy so that we can focus on this like inner world that's manifesting around us, right? This deep internal alchemization that's happening within the sign of the self and Aries, and also this dark half of the year that we're moving into, this winter months where we're meant to go inward and die so that we can be reborn again in the spring. Okay, the 27th is a really big day. Hi, Robin. She says, I have a Leo North Node in the 8th house. I also have my North Node in the 8th house. Like the realm of the occult in astrology is definitely a avenue you need to be diving into. But a Scorpio sun in the 11th with Aquarius moon in the 2nd, which is my South Node. That can't be random because that feels very synchronistic. Yeah, none of our charts are random. They're all synchronistic. We incarnated with this specific chart in order for us to embody the mission we came here to embody, both what we came here to create in this life and also all the karma we came to rewrite. Okay, on the 27th, Mercury squares Pluto. And Jupiter retrograde re-enters Pisces. See, I knew it happened this month. I just couldn't find it on the chart. The same day that Pluto conjuncts Atlantis. Okay? So Pluto here at 26 degrees is conjunct Atlantis. And those are both square Mercury. All right? So Mercury square Pluto is very intense and penetrating, but it is very triggering, and there are power struggles and like intense actions needing to be taken to rectify this sort of tension that is transpiring by this square, right? Both these planets have something they want to do, and neither of them can do it unless they both kind of give a little bit. We need a compromise, ultimately. But whenever Mercury makes aspects to Pluto, it really intensifies our mind, and it helps us to pierce and see. So this is happening with Pluto conjunct Atlantis. So we're seeing into realms that sit beyond this current time, space, reality, right? The message that is coming through that revolves around power and systems and hierarchy, our governmental structures, this sort of Pluto direct right on top of America's Pluto. This Pluto right here is very strongly tied to the Russia-Ukraine crisis. They tied the invasion to that original Pluto return of America. Now that Pluto is direct and going to come over for that third and final time, guarantee you they're going to do something again. And we can see that, like, if it was just traditional astrology, we would see Pluto here, that planet of power in this area of the system, trining Mercury in Libra. Libra governs relationships, but in mundane astrology, it governs war. Like, people think Libra governs peace. It doesn't. Aries governs the warrior, but Libra governs the war, because Aries only governs the self. It's just one fucking person. It can't govern the war because that's interactions with other people. Libra governs war. Libra governs diplomacy. Libra governs treaties, with other countries, like, I don't know, maybe Ukraine and the NATO alliance. Libra governs how countries project like their own shit onto other countries. So, you know, like everybody talking about Russia blowing up the pipeline when it was probably us who blew up the pipeline. Those type of things happen around this time. So I don't really know. I don't, you guys know I don't really like to make predictions, but sometimes it's just so obvious. This Libra energy has a lot to do with like signing contracts, relationship dynamics. And with this trying to Pluto right here, those relationships are on the world stage. They are hierarchies. They are involved within the system of governments of the world and the power dynamics and power plays that are playing out right now. And we can see this in traditional astrology. But then if we look at the asteroid, we can see like these power dynamics and these power plays, like they fucking originated in Atlantis. We are seeing repeat dynamics happening right now. And it feels very much so like this energy of like deja vu. So if you're feeling that around this time, like it's here. It's here. Okay. Oh wait, Jupiter enters Pisces. Okay, so Jupiter also enters Pisces on that day. That's a big shift from Jupiter in Aries back into Jupiter in Pisces. Jupiter in Aries is the seen world, the realm of light, the realm of the self, the realm of identity. Jupiter in Pisces is we lose ourself. We merge with the Akashic field. We are blending with the collective unconscious, the whole, the cosmic womb, the vastness of it all. So our higher self is about to dip back into that boundaryless realm. And so let's hope that Saturn in Aquarius just resets some boundaries, because we're going to fucking need them. But it's dipping back into that realm of mysticism and magic and inspiration and creativity. And Neptune is still retrograde, and so it's really seeing clearly in that realm, as opposed to like the mirror realm of illusions that energy can also represent. Okay. On the 28th, we are going to have a live stream here on YouTube. I am going to do a giveaway for Patreon members only. So you have until the 28th to join Patreon if you want to be entered into this giveaway. But I'm going to give away one of my readings. So I did this back when I first launched my Patreon, and my lovely client, she just sent me the most beautiful painting as a thank you, and this lovely note. I'm going to post it in my stories. She gave me permission to. It's so lovely. And it reminded me, oh yeah, I did a giveaway back when I launched Patreon, and I said when I reached 100 members I was going to do another giveaway. Well, we're over 100, and so I'm going to do a giveaway of a reading. That reading will be done in November. You'll be one of my November clients. So on the 28th, it's going to be a giveaway live stream where I'm going to have my kids help me write all your guys' names. I'll put it in a bucket or whatever, and I'll pull one of you. So if you're a Patreon member, you're automatically entered into it. You don't have to do anything else. I have all your names. Like I said, you have till the 28th to join. You can join for as little as $3, and then you have the ability to win this giveaway. And then I'm also going to do, so it's going to be a giveaway live stream paired with like a look at that Luna software that I'm working with. I have the affiliate link down below. You guys can get 10% off. I know many of you have gotten it already. Wow, I'm surprised how many of you have signed up. If you guys are working with Luna, write in the comment section or write in the chat how you're liking it. But I'm going to dive in. I'm going to show you guys some of the things that it can do. If you're in the live stream chat, I'm going to use your guys' charts. So if you guys want to type your birth information into the chat on that night of the 28th, I'll pull up your charts to use as examples. And then, you know, I can't look at a chart without telling you guys some shit. So it'll be like little tiny little mini readings with whatever comes through. But it's going to be a live stream where we are going to dive into the Luna software and also do a giveaway for one of my, galactic readings. On that same day, so I thought it was so great that I chose this day for the giveaway before I looked at the transits or I made the calendar. And it just so happened to be that on this same day, Venus, the planet of relationships, will be conjunct Alexandria, that like lost ancient knowledge. And I think it's really cool that I'm going to do a giveaway for other people of like esoteric occult astrology, because that's what Scorpio governs. And it's like weird esoteric occult astrology that I feel like I have pulled from the forgotten spaces of time ultimately. So I think it's really divinely aligned to do a giveaway on that day. I'm excited about it. On the 29th, Mercury entered Scorpio. So we're really entering into spooky season. After that, we have Mercury, our mind, the sun, our vitality, our consciousness, and Venus, our heart and our relationship dynamic, all in Scorpio. That sign that is very focused on these like deep, internal, intimate relationships and the alchemization of the self. This sort of internal death, rebirth process, right? We'll talk all more about this later in the month when we talk about our Scorpio moon. On the 30th, Mars stations retrograde. All right, so we talked about this a little bit earlier. Mars stations retrograde at 25 degrees of Gemini, conjunct the asteroid Sophia, which represents this sort of like pre-conscious, primordial realm of the goddess ultimately, and will be retrograde until January. So he's going to be moving backwards all the way until January 12th. Then he will station direct and move forward over that same area all the way until March. So this area is a focus. Right now, look at your chart, see what house does Gemini fall in, because you're going to be doing a lot of restructuring, a lot of changing, a lot of redirecting of your energy when it comes to this realm. Whether you want to or not. So like, just try to do it. Just try to do it. Okay. Last one. On the 31st, it's obviously Samhain and Halloween, and the sun will be conjunct Alexandria on that day. So Samhain is believed to be this like period of the year where the veil is the thinnest, right? It's not the darkest night of the year. That's the winter solstice, which is often focused way too much on light and not darkness, which it should be. But it is this period that is considered to be the thinning of the veil. And I think that it's fucking awesome that on this day that is considered the thinnest veil, our sun, our light, is not only shining in Scorpio, the realm of the mysteries, but it's also conjunct Alexandria, that asteroid that represents the lost mysteries. The lost esoteric mysteries have been forgotten to time that we can ultimately remember and pull back from the other side of the veil. A veil that was just pierced open during a Scorpio eclipse. And we also have Pluto on Atlantis around that time, piercing what I'm calling the Atlantean veil, helping us to see how this timeline is so very much mirrored in our current one. If you have not watched the Atlantis video that I did, it's available here on YouTube. But I talk in that video about how we are literally at a mirrored version of the fall of Atlantis. Where the stars were at the time of Atlantis, like let's say like the stars that were here at the time of Atlantis are down here now. We are literally flipped. We're completely flipped on the wheel of the year and a mirror to what it looked like at the time Atlantis fell. We are literally a reflection of it. And during this time, we can pierce into that sort of esoteric, lost mystery school realm that is so very much rooted still in these power structures, these hierarchies, these hidden orders that Pluto governs, and the suppression of this information that Pluto governs, like the suppression of the information and also the uncovering of it ultimately. But we have a lot of this stuff bubbling up towards the end of the month, a lot of this energy of like piercing through in order to see, in order to unlock the mysteries of the self and our very existence. Okay, we talked about all the things. Oh, Mars is also conjunct Orion's belt throughout the entire month. Orion's belt falls from about like 22 degrees of Gemini to about 25 degrees of Gemini. And Orion represents the same sort of energy that Gemini represents. It represents this sort of polarization, this sort of split, this sort of us versus them, light versus dark, the war, the duality. And we have this sort of warrior sitting in the middle of that war. But what we have in Gemini, we have not only Orion and Gemini, which represents duality, but we also have the pole star. And at the time that Mars stations retrograde, not only is it conjunct Sophia, ultimately the other side of that polarity that needs to be remembered and integrated, the unconscious, the goddess, but it's also conjunct the pole star. It's off by like 3 degrees. The pole star is at 28 degrees. So while Gemini and Orion houses the split, the war, the conflict, it also has the pole star, which sits there as the stillness within the chaos. So it has the ability to find the middle of these two pillars, and end the war within, right? So we have this warrior in the midst of this dualistic war, ultimately on its path towards the pole star within, that stillness, that center point, that singularity within. It's also in opposition to the galactic center too by 2 degrees, 25 degrees, 27 degrees. So that it stations retrograde pretty much opposite the galactic center ultimately. It's an intense retrograde cycle over the next 7.5 months. All right, guys, I pulled a couple of cards and we will call it a night. If you guys have any questions, you can... Hello, where's my... Okay, there. Creative Mystic says, I saw that Pluto was going direct in Capricorn. New establishments, new rules, collective chaos, and then order. Yeah, Pluto going direct in Capricorn. Yeah, I said it's like the shifting of like one order to another, one hierarchy to another. Pluto also governs like hidden agendas and like things done in the shadows. It literally governs the realm of the occult and secret societies, any sort of power grabs, and we're definitely going to be seeing all new things in that realm, 100%. She says collective chaos and then order. I wouldn't say... We're at this tail end of destruction. So I think it's still a lot of destroying, and I think a lot of like the new order, new world order is happening in the underbelly. It's happening in the hidden reaches of our reality. Many of us can see, but a lot of others can't. Definitely power grabs. Definitely a lot to do with like power moves between governments and relationship dynamics made between countries. Okay. All right, pulled some cards and we'll call it a night. Okay, so I pulled 2 archetype cards because they came out together. And that was the Starborn and the Self, which makes a lot of sense. We are beginning to embody this sort of Starborn self, right? By cracking open this egg in order to embody who we really are. This speaks a lot to this Aries moon that we have coming up here. It makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to go ahead and read these two from the book. This card we'll read after. This is how we can best do this. This card is how we can best embody this starborn self. These archetypes are the kind of the energy of the month. It kind of encapsulates what this month is going to be about. So, Starborn. The divine child, the star child, the destined. An elusive yet radiant aspect of the self. The starborn archetype points to the cosmic spark of light that arrives with each being at birth. The moment the newborn crowns, whether vaginally or surgically, the royal stars above are said to consolidate in a unique shape that maps our path, pretty much what I just said to you, that maps our path in the world. The idea of destiny is controversial, yet the starborn naturally feels a sense of destination and purpose, aiming itself toward a future that is beyond the mundane. When this card appears, travel back to your birth story or your birth chart for clues and insight. What did you desire when you were young? Practice seeing your life from a mythic point of view rather than a series of logistics. Read the story of the three fates and envision yourself born under the stars with a unique destiny. That is so perfect for eclipse season. Read the story of the three fates because fate and destiny are about to take the reins and you better just go with the ride. And envision yourself as being born under the stars with a unique destiny. This fate and destiny are setting you on course to like what it is you came here to do ultimately. Have your chart ready. Study your consolidated shape. Ask questions. What does the process conjure in you? Faith or mistrust? What would happen if you saw the galaxy as your ally? Oh my God, I love this card so much. Okay. When this card appears, don't be surprised if you receive a surge of desire for a long lost dream you haven't visited since childhood. Let this desire shake you up. When this archetype is evolved, it is alight, trusting, vibrant, and aimed. When it's in its lower archetype, it is feelings of misalignment and loss of longing. And it says to go deeper, you can read about the three fates. Okay, so the self, because we're stepping into this energy of the star-born self, like something beyond these masks, these identities, these wounds of the self that we have been holding on to in the area of Aries or wherever, our first house. And we're stepping more into our galactic, our cosmic, our destined self, as opposed to these identities we've taken on that aren't even us, right? So the self, the real self, the soul, the witness, the watcher. The self is the prism that allows the spectrum of our personalities to radiate. It does not judge, prohibit, suppress, or oppress any of its parts, as it lovingly knows that all aspects have a time and a place, and it leads us to experience the full breadth of life's offerings. The self is the central abiding container, the awareness of the infinite universe of possibilities. When this card appears, it is a call to step back into witness consciousness, to observe yourself navigating the world. Ask yourself, am I the stew or am I the chef? In most situations, your ego draws us into the cauldron where we swirl and spin and smolder in chaos. Yet, The self is a graceful culinary dancer, watching, waiting, observing as the spectrum of ingredients become the flavor of our life. Look in the mirror for 30 seconds or more. Attempt to see the you that is behind you. It's no surprise that two central mantras in the yogic tradition concern themselves with the self. Experiment with the mantras Soham, which means I am that, and Satnam, which means true identity. If this card is perplexing for you, you are on the right track. It challenges us to expand our sense of identity beyond the, quote, little self, and the ego resists such movement. This speaks a lot to the Jupiter opposition to the galactic center of this. When this archetype is evolved, it is witnessing and accepting of new aspects of life. But when it's in its lower archetype, it is disjointed, fatigued, and diffused of energy and purpose. And it says to go deeper, you can read the poem, This Clay Jug. Okay, so I pulled one last card and I'm like, cool. The archetypes of this month are the Starborn self. How can we best embody this Starborn self? And the card that came out from the Wild Harmonic Oracle is Air of Water, Intuitive Navigation. And I love this considering we are going to be in the seasons of Libra, an air sign, and shifting into the season of Scorpio, a water sign. So it speaks very heavily to the energy we will be navigating from one to the other, right? So I'll go ahead and read this and we'll call it a night. Air of Water. As the interconnected intelligence embodies into the flowing feeling of life, ingenuity is married to instinct. Meditation. Creative thinking. Waking dreaming. Trusting my sense of direction. Energy... No, I messed that up. Okay, creative thinking, waking dreaming, trusting my sense of the direction energy is flowing, and being able to flow with it. A card of funding a deep relationship with my sense of how and when to make my moves. Hello, Mars retrograde. It is a navigation, and the instruments will be both general to all and unique to me. It is learning the idiosyncratic language of my spirit and playing with the guidance it offers. Below me, the sea is filled with currents. Above me, the sky is filled with the drive of the four winds. I build a vessel that allows me to travel between the two. I use them both to move me in the direction I desire, but I also yield to them when forces indicate it's time to go another way. Hello, eclipse season. It asks everything of me to risk it all at times, yet I would not want it any other way. I will take my journey as it comes and learn to ride both wind and wave into my discovery. Inquiry. How is it I experience intuition? And what is it telling me right now? Oh, those are good cards. I never read them beforehand. I mean, the self card I pull that all the time for my clients, so I'm pretty familiar with the description. But these two, I don't pull very often. Those were so perfect. Such a fabulous summary of the month ahead. Like, if you guys watched, if you are just hopped in here and you watched nothing else but this, like, that's where we're at. That's the month. We're good. We're golden. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I will see you on Friday only on Patreon. And we're going to dive into Andromeda, the whole Andromeda mythology, and the psyche mythology, and how that is really playing out in the sky right now, particularly the Andromeda myth. And those are all the stars that we can see up in the sky right now. So this is the stories that our ancestors would be at least in the Western world, would be telling. But yeah, we're going to dive in. I'm going to dive into like all the historical connections to the Andromeda constellation as well. And even see how other cultures viewed those stars, because not everybody looked at them as Andromeda. But yeah, should be fun. So if you guys want to join us, the link is down below. For those of you here on YouTube, I will see you for the B&B episode. I forget when that is. I can never remember all this stuff. On the 13th. On the 13th, and we'll dive back into that book, and then I'll see you guys again later in the month for that giveaway. That will be a YouTube video, so everybody can come and watch it, and we'll dive into the Luna software and all the things that it does, but the giveaway is only going to be for Patreon members. And like I said, if you're a Patreon member, you're already entered. You don't got to do anything. So, see you guys later. Bye.